So we have another fantastic guest with us here at COP29 with We Don't Have Time on the edge of the Caspian Sea in the city of Baku. Mark Watts, the Executive Director of the C40 cities, unbelievable network of mainly, I think, quite large cities, mega cities around the world. Mark, we wanted to really ask you a little bit about, though, what is the purpose, what is the importance of the voice of cities in these UN climate conferences, these COPs?
Well, I mean, the simple thing is half of the people in the world live in cities. 3/4 of our emissions are from cities. So you can't solve the global climate crisis without cities. But I think there's a more important thing than that, which is the leaders of the cities, particularly the big cities in C40, have really found a way to make multilateralism work. So they are collaborating together. They've set collective science-based targets. They measure each other's performance. In C40, there are leadership standards, so you only stay part of the network if you're delivering on them. And so we bring to the COP a powerful part of government that is working collaboratively against science-based targets and just about on track to where they should be under the Paris Agreement.
How interesting that, sorry, I had to pick up on that, because how interesting that if they don't follow what they promised to do, they eventually may find themselves kicked out of the club, right? Which is what you don't happen with governments here if they don't follow their NDCs, their national climate plans.
Completely. So they agree, they hold each other to account, and then they use an organisation like us to tell them how they are performing against the targets they have set based on science.
Right. How interesting. Do you think the governments here, the national governments, fully accept that cities are absolutely critical, but do you think the governments really internalize how important you are and act accordingly as a result?
No, we'd like to have a bigger voice here. We think we could really add some positive energy, some dynamism, more of it to things like COPs. It is an improving situation, though. Since last year in Dubai, there are now 74 governments that have committed to something called CHAMP. So it's a commitment that when they bring forward their new nationally determined commitments, their new climate plans, they will have done them having worked it through with all the subnational levels of governments, the provinces, the regions and cities, so that what they bring to COP then will be a genuine national plan for how to tackle the climate crisis, not just a commitment by a national government.
Right, that's very interesting indeed. And these are these cities and these countries are they speckled around the world? I mean, it's not just in the rich countries, but also.
No, it's very spread, and I think probably the most positive thing for me of this whole COP is Brazil's new NDC. Right at the heart of that big blue box, if you look at the actual paper, is their commitment to CHAMP. They've established what they call climate federalism in Brazil, so a presidential commission that brings together mayors and governors with the federal government to plan out how they're going to deliver Brazil's climate plan. And there's money is following it. So there's a green resilient cities program funded by the national government in Brazil that's delivering on that.
Would that be a kind of model for everybody?
If every country did what Brazil is now doing with its climate federalism model, we'd be moving a lot faster. Because cities are running the services and responsible for the things where you can make emissions cuts quite fast, actually. The transport system, managing waste, methane emissions from waste, regulating buildings. It's reducing the demand for fossil fuels. And within our member cities, for example, there's a commitment to halve the use of fossil fuels by 2030. Immeasurable, they're being tested against it alongside that halving emissions. So they're focused on the thing that governments have found the hardest to do, to actually do something about stopping subsidising and investing in fossil fuels.
Right, very interesting indeed. So when we look at this COP in particular, have there been, or do you expect or hope for, some announcements which would actually support the cities to move even further and faster in their decarbonisation and in their building resilience to the shocks that are already underway?
Well, I think the three announcements here that have been, they've all been the new NDCs. So the Brazilian one, which is fantastic, and it's got multi-level partnership at its heart. The UK, which another good strong target, but also a commitment to CHAMP, and the UAE last year's COP hosts also have got that CHAMP and multi-level partnership. So we're pleased with all of that. Right now there's an urban ministerial going on, so a dialogue between ministers of the countries here and mayors and subnational leaders. Again, that's good, it's a dialogue. the big thing, obviously, we need the finance outcome from this COP. Everybody needs the commitment for the money on the table.
Yes.
The ask from cities, we think we need about $800 billion per year of additional public investment by 2030. So it's a very large amount of money in one sense, but also it's actually only equivalent to something like the Inflation Reduction Act budget in the United States, just one country.
Yeah. And of course, when we look at these eye-watering sums to some people, they're quite hard to internalize, actually. I mean, I don't know what $1 trillion even looks like, right? But when you stack those against the cost that, you know, the world is facing if they let climate change rip, then it's actually peanuts. And infrastructure investments are happening anyway. It's just a little bit more, maybe, just to climate-proof them. So it's actually not as big as it sounds on paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an insurance policy. It's an investment in the future.
Yeah.
I get a kind of weekly digest of all of the climate impacts that are happening in C40 cities. And whereas it used to be a few years ago, maybe once a month there'd be something of note. Then it was once a week. Now there are so many each week across our cities that you can't count them. And what I hear from mayors is really they're starting to will start to lose the ability to focus on reducing emissions because they've got to spend all their effort on just coping with the disaster that has just happened. So yeah, that exactly as you say, this is an investment in our future. It's not a cost.
Yeah. I suppose the last reflection here is there clearly are lots of cool things happening in the world. I mean, you know, the doubling of renewable energy every 2.5 years, and some of the things you just pointed to with cities and also in partnership with government. But I don't know, I get a feeling talking to people around the room that given we've got 5 years to halve emissions and to have a 50-50 chance of hitting net zero in 2050, that there needs to be perhaps a greater sense of urgency on behalf of the national governments and other players in this space, whether it be the international banks and all kinds of other vital players in this, but particularly the governments, because they set the policy and the course, to really strive much harder. Some people have said to me, oh, you know what, this COP here, we're all looking forward to Brazil. Oh, that's great, but Brazil, that means we're 4 years away from halving emissions. Yeah, I mean, every day seems to count right now, and you don't get that sense of urgency that every day counts. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There's a lack of sense of urgency, even though everybody knows how desperately urgent the situation is. But I think part of the problem is it's sort of structural. These COPs they're not set up for that urgency to really come across. I'd like to see a change where it's less about negotiation. We need that going on in the background, but it's more about implementation. So do what we do in the city space. Every year, cities, governors, national governments come, they report on how they've delivered in the last year. So there's a stock take every year, not every 5 years. They set out what they're going to do for the next 12 months, not 20 years ahead. And then we all focus on that and collaborate on how we can achieve it.
That's a really good point. Actually, I remember after the Paris Agreement, when I was still working at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, there was a big debate among the then head Cristiano, but also others, about what then we do with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now we have the Paris Agreement, and now it's about implementation. And one thing was, we need to now sweep away all those work programs that have been acquired over the last, well, not quite since 1992, but quite close. And yet I still see on the screens here there's a meeting of the something framework on something else, which I know jolly well was agreed 15 years ago, which actually has been superseded by Paris. So there's a lot of excess baggage on the ship that could just be put on, over the side, right? And we could focus, as you say, on the core challenge, which is a stock take, a report, and a definite plan for the next 12 months by each nation.
Exactly.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah, I love excess baggage is the right way of putting it. And I'm a big believer in multilateralism. We need COPs. We need them to succeed, but let's set them up to succeed by focusing on what matters.
Yeah.
Have you done what you said you'd done against science? Well, first of all, have you got a science-based target? We need all of our member cities have to have science-based targets.
Yep.
Paris Agreement compliant to be a member. All countries should have them with the new NDCs.
Yep.
You've got the target. Have you delivered against it? what are you going to do for the next year to stay on track? One of the things we're doing to kind of reinvent within C40 is it's already a condition of membership to have a Paris Agreement compliant plan. Now it's going to be, as agreed last week, to have an annual climate budget. So you marry the annual financial budget setting process against the carbon budget target. So you've got to show you're spending money that will deliver the target. I'd like to see every government do the same thing. If they had that and we brought that here every year, we'd have a real understanding of what was happening and what needs to happen.
Yeah, super. Mark, thanks very much indeed. That was a great insight, and I think very helpful also to the audience out there to actually understand what we could do to make this thing faster and quicker. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.